in the oxygen crisis, who was the most important person? It was the oxygen technician, the guy who handled the cylinder, who ensured that when the tanker came to the hospital, the person connected it. If that person was not skilled enough to do the job, you ended up in the mess that we were in. So it's so very important to see what is the skill that you need. So you have to first define that piece and then seek who is the best person to be able to provide that skill set, against saying, oh, the doctor will do everything, the nurse will do X, and the allied health worker, this entire sea and gamut of people who actually hold the system up. And by this kind of approach, you are diluting, you're hampering the path of clinical care.
I think in the best interest of time, we can begin. As our members keep joining in, they'll be part of the conversation. So happy to see the fraternity here, and thank you very much for taking the time out to join in today, and welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience that they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us. We've received close to 150 registrations, most of whom are senior leaders. Many of our members as well and are repeat visitors to our webinars, which is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online channels as well. For those of you who are new with us today, the Blue Circle is an exclusive community and ecosystem which is curated for business leaders currently across 6 sectors, which are e-mobility, energy, real estate, healthcare, aerospace and defense, and logistics. Very soon, we're adding 14 new sector communities to our platform to form the Blue Circle 20. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. And in response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series and our digital publication. And in addition to this, and you'll be happy to know that we very recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app, which is curated for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with like-minded people, house high-quality curated content, and provide access to business opportunities across our core sectors. So those leaders among you who are interested, please do join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section as well, and also soon send out invitations to our new guests post the webinar. And today, as part of our Skilling India series, we're privileged to have big minds and leading thinkers of the industry join in for the healthcare community's discussion. The topic is healthcare worker skilling and deploying. In the best interest of time, I will just briefly mention the names and designations of the panelists who are here with us today. We have with us Mr. Ashish Jain, Chief Executive Officer, Healthcare Sector Skill Council, Mr. Ranjit Madan, Chief Executive Officer, Life Sciences Sector Skill Development Council, Dr. Shubnum Singh, Principal Advisor Healthcare, CII, Dr. Srinivasa, Pulijala, Chief Executive Officer, Apollo Medskills, and our chair and moderator for the session is Mr. Pavan Choudary, CEO French multinational Vigon India, Chairman Medical Technology Association of India, sits on several boards across the country, is a leading public intellectual and a best-selling author, and a leading thinker across sectors. So thank you very much, ma'am and sirs, for joining in today. I now request Mr. Choudary to please chair and moderate the session, sir.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. So let me straight away perimeter the discussion. How do we classify these healthcare workers who we are talking about? The topic is healthcare workers skilling and deploying. So healthcare workers, for the purpose of this discussion, and the largely held universal definition is doctors, nurses, and allied health workers. And allied health workers will go down right to the ward boy. The topic might veer a little more towards nurses and allied health workers because of the background of the experts here, as well as because of the fact that doctor skills we have taken up in a big way in other webinars of BlueCircle. So there is a historical, cultural, socio-economic tradition in this space. The pecking order, the hierarchy, there's a lot which you inherit in the space of healthcare workers. And there is some inertia also. In terms of political awareness, also, legislations are often behind times because legislators and policymakers are not fully up to date about this space. This is one piece. The other point is, how does a society look at vocational education? In India, like in several other countries of the world, the vocational tracks are unfortunately less valued by society. Those who go on the vocational tracks are stereotypically sometimes seen as troublemakers, underachievers. Those who go there actually don't have the means to go elsewhere or the means to go to college. And preparing for manual labor, which can dirty your hands and you in some way, is also seen as a little low in some societies. To compound this, there might be some socio-cultural stigma also, which might be associated with certain kinds of work, unfortunately. For example, some nurses have told me that one of the reasons why there is such a high level of unemployment or such a high level of vacancy in the nursing sector is also because we do not get our due from the society. In fact, when our parents are looking for grooms for us, they are a little hesitant in telling them that our daughter works as a nurse, because nursing profession is very myopically or narrowly seen. If that narrow view prevails, then they see the nursing profession as a profession where nurses spend time with strangers at odd hours. This is the unfortunate reality in the social space in some areas. This is, of course, changing. COVID has brought the importance and the vital necessity of these healthcare workers. But before we come to that, I would like to go to Shubnum and ask her to tell us what is the socio-cultural milieu which we have inherited. What is the role of hierarchy in the workplace? And where do you think healthcare worker context setting for this discussion should begin? Shubnum.
Thank you, Pavan, and my compliments to BlueCircle with the work that you're doing in a very short span of time. And I wish you well and to continue on this path. It's extremely important. I think from everybody's perspective to be on what I say terra firma. It's easy to strategize and look at things and give advice at 50,000, 80,000, but being on terra firma actually delivers results. So I'll take it forward from where you left off and put a disclaimer that healthcare is not unique or different to other sectors as far as the hierarchical nature. If you go through 18th, 19th, 20th century, every organizational structure that has been developed on 2-3 principles. One is it has to be uniform, right? Second is there should be a system of command and control, right? So these things today cease to be applicable. What is seeped into every industry, and particularly healthcare, is the requirement for it to be interdisciplinary, team-based, and matrixed. Now, this kind of working environment doesn't lend itself to be governed in a historical sense, right? And if it is to be in this matrixed way, why is it matrixed? Because of the need and requirement for a very fast evolving world into spheres of care pathways which do not speak to the historical hierarchical system. So if you look at the hierarchical system, the doctor is at the apex, and the allied health worker, when you read out your description or your definition, it started with doctors, nurses, and a sea of allied health workers, right? That's the way you put it. So in that context, the organizational structure does not speak to today. Today's organizational structure has to be extremely agile, creative, adaptable. Now, coupled with this, as you very rightly pointed out when you spoke about nurses and the social stigmatization, nobody wants to even hear the word night soil. Nobody wants to hear the word night soil. And anybody who's dealing with night soil is a pariah, right? And actually in healthcare, you deal with the source of the night soil downwards, right? But you're never associated with a doctor or a surgeon who has, who literally muddies his hands, because the hierarchical system has placed and anointed the doctor at the top of the pyramid. The other very important part I'd like to highlight, and that is jobs or roles. You look at HR. HR is designed to identify a role and then place a person in it, right? So in healthcare, it's exactly the opposite. You have the person, the doctor, the nurse, the allied health worker, and the job roles are defined and developed. This is what the doctor will do, this is what the nurse will do, and this is what the allied health worker. This is not the best way of being able to identify the right person for the right job. So this is extremely critical for a mindset to be changed, that it is the role. Take the latest COVID crisis, and then I'll stop because I'll go beyond my 2 minutes. In the oxygen crisis, who was the most important person? It was the oxygen technician, the guy who handled the cylinder, who ensured that when the tanker came to the hospital, the person connected it. If that person was not skilled enough to do the job, you ended up in the mess that we were in. So it's so very important to see what is the skill that you need. So you have to first define that piece and then seek who is the best person to be able to provide that skill set, against saying, oh, the doctor will do everything, the nurse will do X, and the allied health worker, this entire sea and gamut of people who actually hold the system up. And by this kind of approach, you are diluting, you're hampering the path of clinical care, because the person who's supposed to do the clinical care is not only delivering other parts of skill sets, but is accountable for that skill set, right? So everything at the end of the day is said, it is under the supervision of the doctor, it is under the supervision and accountability of the doctor, which further muddies the water as far as this piece is. Back to you, Pavan.
Excellent. What a brilliant beginning. So 3 points on which completely arrested my attention were the hierarchical nature. You are saying hierarchy may have some uses. However, we should make sure that hierarchy doesn't become stifling for competence, and hierarchy does not monopolize all the status and all the power of the organization in one particular cadre of doctors. This is one point. And the other point is the night soil point, which is also a great point. And the changing importance of the roles. Like suddenly COVID found that the respiratory therapist or the respiratory technician is the most important person in the hospital. Let me not comment on these, but I will park these. If the panel leaves any point which I have to say on this, I will comment, but I would rather now go to Srinivasa and ask him to chime in from his perspective, what he feels of what has been said so far. Srinivasa.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Pavan. And I think Dr. Shubnum has given very, very important points here. I think it's all about mindset. Because I worked as a doctor, clinician in a hospital, and then now I'm heading an organization which trains the allied health workers. So this stigma, I think this is definitely a mindset thing, and this has been cascading right from their childhood or schooling. I think this hierarchical framework. If you see, if one has to become a medical doctor or a nurse, there are entrance examinations, and the students at a school level take them post school, they take these exams, and they're always in this aura that, okay, someone who's becoming a doctor is in a kind of a sharper person. And that's where this begins. I think this mindset of superiority begins there. Then I think that sense of dignity of labor is also has to be inculcated right from the schools, that, okay, people joining these roles out of passion is limited. They actually, it's like someone who is actually leaving a medical seat, who is not able to get a medical seat, as actually getting into a physiotherapy or a nursing or a pharmacy. That's where I think this is beginning. And it's all about teamwork. I think Dr. Shubnum made a very good example of an oxygen technician, right? So everyone is important in a healthcare environment, and it's about teamwork. I think this needs to be inculcated right from schooling, but I think it has to be inculcated through, we have internships. Every clinical profession has an internship. I think that is where I think every healthcare professional has to be taught about elements of teamwork, so that the socio-cultural barriers or elements will not come into picture in a healthcare environment. I think COVID has been a great lesson. World over, I think people have recognized the importance of each and every healthcare professional. And I'm sure, I think in days to come, these socio-cultural barriers will not be there in Indian healthcare. We don't see much in, I worked in UK, so I've not seen much of this differentiation between a doctor and a nurse, because there are also nurse practitioners there who has authority to prescribe medicines, right? So I think that kind of culture is also beginning to come in India. And I hope that, I think in days to come, this gap between the healthcare hierarchy will soon fade away.
Great points. In fact, I have also worked for some time in UK, and I found that nurses have a much higher status there. And I also found that they had become organized as a group much earlier there. And in fact, I also found that some, like we say that when we have to take somebody to a hospital, which doctor do you know in that hospital? In UK, usually they say, which nurse do you know in that hospital? And I've had some very enlightened doctors coming on my TV program, like Dr. O.P. Yadav. He openly told on a TV program which was mass produced and disseminated, that I learned my surgery from doctors, but I learned my healing from nurses. Great points.
Great point.
Coming to Ashish. Ashish, what would you like to add to what has been said so far regarding the socio-cultural and workplace milieu?
First of all, thank you for inviting me for this discussion. I could see, I think, a lot of good points have been already made. But just to add to, I think what's on the positive side of it. I'm just going by, I don't have so much of an experience like Dr. Shubnum or Mr. Choudary you have in the field, but in terms of given the limited experience I have, I think I've seen the journey so far in terms of the change of mindset, what we're talking about, or in terms of the change happening in the society. I see that change already happening, but we still has a long way to go. And give you an example to this. So while we started working from the bottom of pyramid, I'm sure Srinivasa will also agree on this. While we started working on creating what we call GDAs or general duty assistant or a ward boy or a bedside assistant, their position in the society was not such well recognized, frankly speaking. I'm talking about not too far off, it's about 5 to 6 years back. But while we work with them today and all, what we see in terms of the kind of the upward progress they have made in terms of the recognition, in terms of the respect which they get, is much more than what was there 6 years back or 5 years back. So there is already a progression to that which is happening. What you're intending to say, that how do we actually bring this socio-cultural kind of shift? Of course, I think, as I said, it's a long way to go to to reach to that level that they be equated to a nurse or a doctor or all equated at the same level. I think that will certainly take a long time for us. And as a society, I think we had, as Dr. Shubnum mentioned, I think in all sectors, not in the sectors, even in a social life, we have created hierarchies. This is how the structure is. But I certainly see a positive change in that now happening. But still, lot recognition, lot respect needs to come in. Also, in terms of the recognition, I think we had to look at, and which is the change certainly happening and starts happening from the policy makers, I believe. What we see right now, the changes happening is, we talk about a doctor, we talk about a nurse in isolation, but I think now change and shift which is happening is that we're talking about as a team of people now. So it's not a doctor only, it's not only a nurse. I think we have to have that team member to be included now as the allied health and the skilled healthcare assistant also as a part of it. So if we can start considering them as a team, I think that will be a positive shift to actually moving towards what we are saying, to achieving that socio-cultural stigma, etc., which is there, which will go on. So I think it has to come professionally from the society, from the fraternity itself, from the healthcare sector itself, where we have to give respect to each cadre which is there working, and have to look them as a team, not as somebody downward, in hierarchical level, because everyone is doing the job which they are assigned, and every job is important, critical. As Dr. Shubnum clearly mentioned, even a person who is handling the oxygen cylinder is very important for the life of the patient. So is the doctor and so is the nurse. So every job is critical for saving the life. And I think it's better for us in the healthcare sector if we start taking this as a team and not see that I am superior or somebody's inferior. If we start having this team building into the sector, which is already happening in some areas and which will happen sooner or later, because of I think Srinivasa mentioned, Dr. Shubnum also mentioned about this. COVID has brought in many learnings for us, and has also taken away many of the boundaries which were there. So if you look at the today scenario, who were the people who were actually dealing with the COVID at the first cut, in the sense while patients were going? So these were these allied health or the skilled healthcare assistants, which are actually in the first go, which are working closely with the patients in terms of dealing with the COVID. Then comes the nurses and the doctors. So everybody is doing their duty, but it's like the onslaught which is coming. So they are there in the first set, and they may not be so much of the PP kits may not be with them. They may not be so, precautions will not be there with them, but still they were working. I think that respect has to come. It's already started coming in, and we need to recognize that much more and more.
Yeah.
I believe that is also coming, and I'll just finish. I think we're running short of time. This respect is also coming if you look at the highest leadership in the country. They are talking about the value of even the ASHA worker, ANM. They're talking about the skilled healthcare assistant. And this is coming none other than the Honorable Prime Minister himself. So when the top leadership start talking about the work which they are doing, I think we all will change, societal change will happen, and they'll all be recognized and respected. Thank you.
Very good. I think your last point was the creme de la creme point, and I will come to that. But let me just bring in Ranjit for a couple of minutes and ask him to tell us whether he sees a similar hierarchy and kind of looking down by the society on the vocational streams which he is championing. Ranjit.
Thank you, Pavan. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this session. Just at the outset, I'd like to clarify that my focus is the life sciences sector, which is, I think, joined at the hip, so to say, with the healthcare sector. It's really the baton of pharma knowledge when it passes on to the healthcare. That's where healthcare sector really starts off. So our focus is really the manufacturing sector of from drug research through to where the drug information is shared with the healthcare sector. So one of the things that as I was hearing this very interesting dialogue about social stigma and dignity of labor and so on, and I was just trying to draw a parallel with what we may have encountered was curiously the point at which the two sectors intersect. So the very critical, the highest volume job role of the medical sales representative. This sector has right through suffered from inadequate numbers of skilled people for this very critical start-off point in the sales and marketing space. And it's not only the highest volume, but 80% of the foreign companies don't have manufacturing in India, so they are pure play sales and marketing. And really, this is the start-off point for a career in such MNCs as well. So, going around talking to people, we found something very curious was that very few people, the candidates, wanted to take up this role because of the stigma attached with being a medical rep. What will the family, the parents say? What will they tell that what is the son or daughter doing? Selling dawai? I mean, that was, it was a kind of a no. And you go to typical institution, Bachelor of Science, B Pharma, the medical rep is at the lowest end of it. Not even on the radar at times. So it took a lot of time, a lot of effort to find what really was wrong. What was the stigma? What was holding people back from it? How can indeed this be sorted out before we sort of looked at various skilling modes and so on? And one of the things that we are now looking at is to just simply tweak it. Of course, there will be changes by calling it something else. And one of the more widely accepted ones is calling it a therapeutic business manager, or short form TBM instead of MSR. And then this will automatically bring in fresh talent, give impetus to the desires of candidates to take up this particular role and so on. So the point that I'm trying to make is sometimes the solutions are relatively simple, and things look much more complicated. But importantly, that these are very critical, and if they are not addressed, then sometimes a whole lot of efforts can be of no avail.
No, excellent point. I think you've spoken about an even more, let me say, disrespected fraternity of medical representatives. And we will come to this. The importance of changing the nomenclature, as well as providing those people some insights on how they can behave better to be respected more, as well as some insights on how to handle disrespect, okay, in a graceful manner, which kind of distinguishes you from your tribe, even if it is looked down upon, and people start behaving a little better with you. But coming to this hierarchy point, I think all of you have made beautiful points. What I would like to just add to this is neurological science is also accepting that hierarchy is hardwired in the brain, because all the new thoughts which have come post Renaissance are still fresh and have existed only for some time. And hierarchy is hardwired in the brain also. However, we also need to know that every individual has some inalienable rights. When we balance the need which hierarchy has and deploy it to that extent, keeping in mind that every individual has some inalienable rights also, then perhaps we have taken an important step towards balancing the stifling hold of hierarchy and it not hurting competence, and it also not monopolizing all the status and all the power to the top level. This is one point. The second point is that the nurse and allied health worker should be told very categorically, not only by the management, but also by the doctors, that you serve the patient. You don't serve the doctor and you don't serve the management as much as you serve the patient. And that is another point which should go through. Also, nurses have often responded to very generous doctors who say that you lead. They say, no, 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 sir, you only lead. Okay. So nurses also have to be told to straighten up. Nurses and allied health workers have to also be told to straighten up, take the accountability and responsibility which goes with it, with some courage. I remember this famous statement by Hutchins, which says, the society which scorns excellence in plumbing, because plumbing is a humble activity, and tolerates shoddiness in philosophy, because it considers philosophy an exalted activity, will have neither good plumbing nor good philosophies. Neither their pipes will hold water nor their theories. So it is very important that we also really understand, as one of the speakers said, the importance and criticality of the function which they are doing and really respect it. And I would like to close this round on what Ashish said, that the top levels have to respect. Recently in Kerala, in one panchayat, they have come out with a unanimous dictate, which has been reported by a Berkeley scholar, that we will not say sir or madam to bureaucrats. We will call them bhai or behan. Because if you defer too much to them, you actually give away that space which you require for free and respectful functioning yourself. This is a very big move, but it will not go very far. We have a prime minister who listens, and we have to somehow reach the prime minister and tell him that you have to bring some socio-cultural and behavioral modifications in society. And if it starts flowing from there, I'm sure what Ashish is saying can become a reality, that the hierarchy which Shubnum mentioned, which is necessary for command and control, will remain, but it will not be stifling competence nor monopolizing status. Superb points. Coming to the next point, which is what skills are required and how they can be upgraded. So just to perimeter this round, there are 3 types of skills which I see are required in all healthcare workers or any worker, for example. Cognitive, which means literacy, numeracy, analytical skills, etc. Technical and vocational skills, which is skills to use tools, methods. And lastly, social and behavioral skills. So taking you to this arena, I would like to again begin with Shubnum and ask her how these skills can be enhanced and upgraded. Shubnum.
So I just take an example, Pavan. Everywhere across in the world, everybody is talking about the challenges post-COVID, that people are opting out of jobs, irrespective of the industry, and healthcare particularly is suffering from this. So we have to sort of step back a bit and ask ourselves, why is this happening? Is this only purely because of COVID? And therein lies your answer. And the short point is, it's not only because of COVID. COVID has brought it to the fore. Ubal liya hai. It was already bubbling, right? Now, when you look at recognition, I've been seeing some of the questions which have been coming up in the Q&A, right? They all center around giving a person space, recognizing the person, so on and so forth. Now, recognition of a person, upgradation of a person in today's day and world has become systemized in your year-ending performance reviews, right? And at the beginning, when you take on a job, as I said, you have a very well-written KRA in which at the end of the year, they try and match that to the KRA. But what they miss out totally at the year-ending performance is you might have exhibited some other skill set, which is equally critical to the job that you're doing or to the organization you're doing, but the system of performance doesn't pick that up. And if it doesn't pick it up, here you as an individual, and take the COVID crisis as an example, every day brought about a new challenge, people falling sick, doubling up, creative solutions were needed instantly, you had to multitask, but I can guarantee you at the end of the day, in a year-ending performance, there will be no system to be able to pick it up. And the reason behind this is, as I said in my opening remarks, that we go not by what role that is to be played and whether the individual that you've hired can do that role, but we go by the individual. So you might have a fantastic clinician, but that clinician may not be the greatest administrator. The nurse would be fabulous where the empathy is concerned, but she may not be very good at being able to cannulate, which is actually what she's supposed to, according to her being a nurse, does. So this brings in a lot of tug and pull, and the result is, again, we bring in uniformity. There has to be some degree of uniformity, otherwise you can't go forward. But when you're skilling and upskilling, you have to give space to see who is the person who should be skilled for this. So Ashish is well aware of this. One insists that anybody who is going in for a skilling course, that you should take a pre-assessment test and then take a post-assessment test. Know what the person already knows, and then see whether what you have designed for the individual actually brings about that impact. So until you have these kind of matching pieces, then only will you be able to move forward. What sense does it make unless there is a doctor who is an administrator? Why should he know how to read a balance sheet? On the other hand, all cadres of healthcare must be sensitized to medico-legal issues today in a highly litigant society, must have sufficient amount of digital literacy. These were unheard of when we were training. Whether you're a nurse, allied health worker, or doctor, digital literacy is part of your DNA today. So effectively, what I'm trying to say is, and this is a well-known phenomena in HR, it is a helical system, right? So in the helical system, the basic nucleotides have to be placed in. Once those basic nucleotides are there, then you will be able to have the helical system of the right matching for upskilling, moving forward, and having the right person do the job. And I'll give you one last example, Pavan. One of the pre-recruitment gaming that is used very widely is that there's a restaurant, and it's a game. It's to assess the ability of a person to be creative, come about with out-of-the-box thinking, have cursory. So you're in a restaurant, you're in a kitchen, and you have a fire. So you have limited a number of tools in that game. You have to douse that fire and move on. So dependent upon the responses of a person, you're able to understand whether they're able to take stress. Are they able to think out of the box? What is the agility of the individual? We don't apply these tools. There are plenty, there's a plethora of them outside. If you start utilizing these tools, then and only then will you be able to have this hierarchical system breakdown to the point that you made. Why don't nurses apply for assistant medical superintendents, medical superintendents, and directors, right? There is a natural pullback. And it's not as if as I said, just like every doctor cannot be a CEO, similarly, every nurse cannot be. But you must give an opportunity for them to be able to be plucked out from there by tools by which you can then groom them and take them up the value chain. Over to you, Pavan.
Excellent point. In fact, I am reminded one medical superintendent, Shubnum, told me that often he was working in a government hospital, often the VIPs come and they ask for me to cannulate. And when I send them the best phlebotomy nurse to them, they say, nahi, boss ko bhejo, boss. So then I go and I tell them, let her only cannulate, sir. She's very well trained by me only. I have only trained her. Though even I don't have any great expertise in that. I never have had, but I just say that to reassure him. But they don't agree. Then I, to my mind, say, okay, now Anna could not punish you. All the high courts and Supreme Courts have not been able to punish you. Now I will come with my cannula and you will be punished. He was just joking. So he said that a lot of iatrogenic problems which happen because of VIP insistence on opening up the chest also by the cardiovascular surgeon. Now, as a cardiovascular surgeon, he might have forgotten or might not have the strength to open it in the best possible manner. But the point which I'm making is that you remind me of this, that that there are so many skills which the nurses have, and it is possible those nurses might be having higher skills and they should be allowed to compete there. The other point which you made was people not working. Even pre-COVID, a global study was made where it became very evident that the prime age of work, 25 to 54, 12% people are not working. And the prediction was that by 2050, 33% of these people will not be working. With COVID, this number will go even further. And with our overall career path, which we give to healthcare workers, where nurses may be employed as a regular nurse or as a contract nurse where the salary comes down, where there is so much social stigma, etc., that 50% of the nurses who have been trained are unemployed, either because employment not being available or they not wanting to become nurses professionally. So great points. And the third point which you have made is skill upgrade assessment before the training and after the training, and assessment should happen. And another point which China is doing very well, we have to fizz up this space. There should be skill competitions, etc., so that people really can show how talented they are at cannulation or let me say, giving first aid and other things. Great points. Coming to Ashish on this. Ashish, what we have done in this space of imparting these skills and upskilling these people on social skills, behavioral skills, vocational skills, and cognitive skills. And also please include that point which Shubnum said, that digital and software literacy is very important today. Ashish, and then I'll come to Srinivasa.
Thank you, Mr. Choudary. I think in terms of the skilling, and I can speak for the programs which are actually under the Skill India mission. And I think Dr. Shubnum is equally, I think, guided that entire thing for healthcare skilling, what we are doing at the Healthcare Sector Skill Council today. What she said and what you're saying right now, I think we had the, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Shubnum with us while we were devising our programs and courses. So what we see now today, all our programs today, be it implemented by Srinivasa through their organization or any organization under Skill India that matter, all these components are already inbuilt into the curriculum now. So which means that we are talking about digital literacy, which is there is a separate module on digital literacy for every worker, every person who is being trained under the Skill India has a component of digital literacy. While you talk about the vocational and the domain specific skills, of course, that's the focus. And again, the focus here through the Skill India mission is to see that they're actually trained hands-on. So it's not theoretical knowledge only, it's more focus on hands-on, so that once they go out, they are actually equipped with the skill set and the competency to deliver what they are supposed to do actually on ground. And as an employer, no one has to spend the time on training them. So it's like creating a job ready person which can then be placed in by any employer. In terms of the social behavioral side, I think there are a lot of things are going on which are added. So I'll give you another example of social social I don't know what the term to be used, but to be sensitive. In our courses now, we have even started building in the component to actually be sensitive around person with disability also. So that component has also been brought into our curriculums, where we're talking about how can they be sensitive to other people which are, from the PWD side. Similarly, on the environmental norms, how well could you actually manage the resources of your employer? It's talk about the green norms. So the current curriculums are being designed. So if there were earlier curriculums which are not there, so already amended curriculums are amended to include those components, which are covering now your technical knowledge, which is basically being provided both in the classroom setting and the practical setting through your simulations, etc., plus your training in the healthcare setup as well. So that's how you actually imbibe those skill sets with you. And this digital skills, social skills, what you mentioned, and the cognitive skills are all being part of the curriculum today. So I think that's very well covered. And this is continuous improvements in the curriculums are being made depending on whatever changes are happening. Whatever change is required to be made because of some either technology, some change in the way the system works. There are new normals which have come up now. So those curriculums are undergoing changes, on a regular basis to meet the requirement of the environment and the employer as well. So, thank you.
Great, super point. Srinivasa, what would you like to add to this?
Yes.
What Shubnum and Ashish have said regarding upskilling.
Yes.
or reskilling of these workers?
Absolutely. I think all good points made already, but there are few things. I think there are, in the cognitive, technical, and behavioral skills, there are few things that cannot be taught through textbooks. These are human factors. Few examples: empathy. You cannot teach empathy in a classroom. So you have to put them in a situation of empathy. Patience and resilience. I think these are three factors which are very, very crucial for any healthcare worker, be it a doctor or a healthcare support worker or a nurse. So how do we teach empathy? How do we teach patience? How do we teach resilience in a healthcare environment? I think as a part of our education system, traditionally, the medical education has got its own clinical experience hours. So they go for an internship, every medical graduate and nursing graduate. And similarly for allied health and support worker system, Healthcare Sector Skills Council has inbuilt an on-job training as a part of every program. So this, what does this on-job training do? It is indirectly teaching them that empathy, resilience, and such factors, but it is also teaching something which is very, very important for a healthcare worker. And it is something like critical reasoning. When I say critical reasoning, suppose the patient is coming with fever, vomitings, and a pain abdomen. There could be over 80 diagnoses that a person can make as a doctor. Similarly, an allied health worker also should know that what could be the possible tests that he needs to carry out. A nurse should know that. So I think this critical reasoning is taught as a part of their on-job training, and these cognitive and behavioral skills are taught in that environment. Coming to the technical skills, yes, what makes Healthcare Sector Skill Council different from other sector skills? I think the tactile skills in healthcare are super important. When we are training a lab technician, you gave a good example yourself about a phlebotomist. So when we train a phlebotomist, it is so important for him to understand the touch factor, what could be the depth of the skin under which the vein is there. So when you're actually training him on how to draw a blood, he should learn that depth, the tactile sensation, which cannot be taught online. I think this is one differentiator why leading brains in the world, both technology and medical sciences, natural intelligence in medicine is as important as artificial intelligence, though artificial intelligence is being built to assist, which is an assistive intelligence in healthcare context. So automation, would it replace healthcare manpower? No. And coming to your straight question on upskilling and reskilling, I think it's very, very crucial. The continuing medical education and continuing nursing education systems have to be regularized. They have to be regulated. Today, it is not mandated in each state. A medical graduate who is a doctor in 1980s continue to be a doctor for lifetime without upgrading himself on skills. And today, the CMEs and CNEs are, actually, they are not motivationally doctors themselves don't join, but I think pharma companies, when they conduct a CME, then they go and learn there. But because there's no mandate. Every doctor wants to upskill himself, every nurse wants to upskill herself or himself. So these opportunities have to be created, mandated, credit points have to be given for these continuing medical educations and nursing educations. And upskilling and reskilling are super important because the protocols are changing each year, because the medical education is also very dynamic. The medical protocols change. The technology is changing year on year. Then similarly, the medicines are changing. There are new drugs that are emerging. So without upskilling yourself, and you have seen that lacuna during COVID, like almost 75% of healthcare professionals were unable to manage oxygen usage, manage ventilators, or for that matter, rational use of oxygen was also missing. I think this is where upskilling and reskilling are super important. I think the government, the Health Ministry of Health, the Sector Skill Councils, Ministry of Skills have to build up a system of credit points for both upskilling and reskilling.
Excellent point. I loved when you said that other than empathy, every healthcare worker requires patience and resilience. And by resilience, I assume you also mean stamina, because really you have to be resilient. Great. The second point which you said, that the critical reasoning skills should be imparted in the healthcare workers also. Because if we will not impart as it is, they are going to get into that space. They say that chaos is a disruption, but chaos is also a ladder. And in the business world, chaos is surely a ladder. Today, very simple AI programs are being developed, which are marking what are the sensitivities of various tests which are done, and the blood tests which are done, and what is the probability of a particular differential diagnosis. Tomorrow, it is possible that those who are digitally and numerically literate might be able to come to a diagnosis almost as accurate as that of a physician. So the talented people from various pools and the thorough people from various pools should be allowed to let their critical reasoning also flower. Earlier, whenever the last disruption came, doctors climbed the ladder and became the biggest businessmen in these spaces. 80% of the world business of healthcare is actually owned by doctors or similar people. It is possible that in this new chaos, the ladder which will emerge might mean digitally literate allied health workers or nurses also climbing the same ladder of entrepreneurial excellence. So you are saying they are going to climb. So let us get the best of them to climb. Let us free them up. Fantastic. And you have also said why it is so important to upskill and reskill, because life cycles of skills is shortening. The skills are changing. Great point, Srinivas. Come, let's go to Ranjit and ask him to add anything incremental on the ways to upskill and reskill. Ranjit.
Thank you, Pavan. Before I come to the very crucial subject of upskilling and reskilling, on skilling itself, if I may make a point. When we started our exercise, we found that here was a sector which, like healthcare, was one of the most highly regulated sectors, number one. Number two, a very high capex sector. Typically, training partners wanting to skill people in life sciences would need, would need something like 25-30 crores capex for this. And thirdly, that here was a sector which was highly globally connected, with India being a pharmacy to the world and exporting some 240 countries, and therefore very much under the very close eye and supervision of organizations such as US FDA and EU, etc. So after really having given it a great deal of thought, we decided that the area of apprenticeship really was the best way to go about skilling people, giving them the requisite practical exposure, and something that when we are looking at about 3 years ago, was at a very, very low or nascent level, despite Apprenticeship Act being there. I must say that since then, we've had fantastic success, and some 25,000 plus apprenticeship contracts have been triggered, over 500 organizations onboarded across the 20 major job roles in this sector. Importantly, the 2 or 3 things that really brought about this success, I think that is relevant to share, are: number one, identifying and realizing that this must start from the biggest organizations who have the requisite resources, both in terms of quality of manpower to mentor and skill people, and indeed the equipment required for skilling people. So knocking over the top 5 or 10 organizations and bringing them in the fold was of great importance. Today, I'm happy to state that not just the top 5 who incidentally are on our governing council, but the top 30 pharma companies are amongst the 500 which are involved in apprenticeship. Number one. Number two is that it required not just group contact and Zoom sessions and all of which, of course, we did, and webinars and seminars, but working individually with these organizations, because it has to be a top-down and bottoms-up approach, both, because apprenticeship must be accepted right through the rank and file of the organization for it to be successful. Otherwise, it will not flow. So we've had to work from the top downwards and bottom upwards, and that's how this is occurred. Coming to upskilling, our experience on this, when the Honorable Prime Minister said that upskilling and reskilling are important, was to do 3 things. One was the gap analysis. Where is it that maximum requirement is there? And that a considerable amount of time had to be spent on that. How we went about it was, we went into the US FDA audits conducted on the Indian organizations and where the major lacunae were, and we found that principally 85% of the areas were in 5 major buckets. So we said those are the buckets that we are going to be focusing on. Number one. Number two is, we found that for upskilling, organizations are not going to be able to free up people, particularly with this pandemic, etc., where they're going all full out. They can only do it in free time, which means evening or over the weekends, etc. So an e-module approach was very, very crucial. And that required validation by the top organizations for it to be meaningful. So that's what we did. We took those 5 major areas. We extracted a couple of modules that needed to be made in the e-module form, involve the top organizations, involve the experts, the subject matter experts from the top organizations to make those modules, to launch them. And the final thing was, the third of the 3 was value validation. Those that underwent this, the organizations, the mentors, the people who underwent the programs, getting their views on how they had performed vis-a-vis those who had not done that earlier. And it's still in the early stages, but once that value add started to come through, we found that this thing sort of started to gain ground. So one of the modules that we've launched, for example, has now had now hundreds of workers. It's the machine operator's job role. The organization's taking to it and utilizing it. These are the 2 things that I wanted to sort of highlight.
Great point. So what you have said is the biggest should be involved. And if this whole movement has to take some cross-fertilizing inputs from a neighboring sector like yours, the leading hospital should be involved in this kind of skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. And the e-moduling also should be fully taken advantage of, and which will actually benefit the hospitals a lot, because every time that a new nurse or 2-3 new nurses join, it is not possible to give them the entire training there and then by a well-educated trainer. So if part of it is digitized and can start them off and keep them occupied when the personal physical trainer is not available, it is this can facilitate the training and improve its productivity so much. So we see the points which we have discussed, and one last point is to be discussed. I'll just share it very briefly and then come to the questions, because there are very solid questions coming from some leaders, both on the they have come before. 7 of them we have selected from before, and I think we'll be able to take 3 or 4. And plus we have also received now on this on the Zoom link, plus I have got some on my WhatsApp. So the last point which we were talking about, which we promised we will speak about, is the mobility and global mobility. Mobility, we have spoken about the social mobility, etc. That how these people can be made to seen as, let us say, doing a vital job, respect worthy, and so on. And also the global mobility, in that we know that there are only 5 major supply countries of healthcare workers, including doctors. And in many countries, 25% of the foreign workforce in healthcare is from India. And this, in year 2022, our government is planning to prepare 300,000 workers, healthcare workers, to migrate to those countries, who will, as it is, migrate. They have a better career path, they have greater social appreciation, and better prospects also. And but the government wants them to migrate, pick up skills, and then come back. Hope that is possible. On this, any comment which the panelists have, I request them to come in along with their comments on the points which I am raising now, which are coming from some really informed leaders who are listening to us. So before I come to what Dr. Venkata Suresh has said, let me come to what Pratika Khandelwal, CEO and founder of OrgFit, has said. She says, how does one define a healthcare worker when it comes to mental health in the absence of any framework? And I'm going to ask Dr. Srinivasa to come in on this. There is a glut of degrees in psychology and way too many diploma courses. Not all degrees and diplomas come with requisite practice and experience. In the mental health space, a meditation practitioner can also project themselves as a healthcare worker. And here is where I raise the question, though there are other questions also she's asked. So how do you draw the line through which we protect the patient from any healthcare worker who has not tread the proven path of medical education? This is the main crux of the question which I would like to highlight before you, Dr. Srinivasa. Please come in.
Yeah, thank you, Pavan. I think that's a really good question. In fact, getting back to the definition of WHO, so health is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. So that's the definition. So, but if you look at most of the hospitals where the patients get admitted, when they get discharged, the assessment is predominantly physical assessment. That means if someone is joining with a typhoid fever and he's getting discharged, yes, the fever has subsided and the test Vidal has come negative now, so he can be discharged. But yes, you're right. The mental well-being of the patient is not assessed properly before discharge. So, so if you look at, again, then coming to the two segments of the psychological disease, one is psychology and second is psychiatry. Okay, so psychology, we all know that it's a scientific study of human mind and behavior, and psychiatry is a branch of medicine that deals with treatment of mental illness. So I think, are we teaching any psychological elements, counseling, clinical counseling elements to all our healthcare workers? Yes, to doctors and nurses, that's part of their curriculum. For the allied health workers, for few of them, yes, it is a part of curriculum. But are we teaching these skills to the support workers, a phlebotomist, a medical lab technician? No, we are not teaching them a complete psychology or the clinical mental well-being skills. But yes, we do teach them that, okay, when you go to a patient, ask him how he's feeling, tell that there is some pain when we draw the blood, and it's a normal phenomenon, trickling of few droplets and blood and so on. But as you rightly said, this is very, very nascent, and there's a need to imbibe that into the regular curricula. Counseling, clinical counseling skills specific to each of the allied health and specific to each of the support worker education has to be part of the curriculum. Very good point mentioned. But when it comes to medical education and nursing education, this is already an integral part. And to your question on the alternate medicine practitioners claiming, they may also claim themselves as a kind of mental well-being. Yes, if you see, India has recognized Ayush, so Ayurveda, homeopathy, allopathy, Siddha. These are recognized forms of medicine, but yoga is also getting into is also getting due recognition across the globe. Do they have effects on the mental well-being of individuals? Yes, there are some strong research studies now that yoga has got a positive effects on, meditation has got positive effects on well-being. So can they claim themselves as mental health workers? I would say no. At this moment, the regulatory frameworks have not defined them as mental health workers. But you have highlighted a gap, definitely, that needs to be addressed.
Great points. So the next point which Shubnum, Dr. Venkata Suresh is making. And I will also tie in another point which Dr. M.R. Kulkarni is making. So Dr. Venkata Suresh is saying that why do you call them allied health workers? They are healthcare technicians with expertise and experience in their technical area. They are equally important in the system and valuable colleagues of doctors and nurses. And Dr. M. Kulkarni is saying that ill-engineered social mindset has created superior feeling under perceived hierarchy. How about some measures to equalize or remove that very hierarchy, focusing on the collective role and intended outcome? And what I would like to add to this is, I think Venkata Suresh, Ranjit, and I, we are already disagreeing with Shakespeare a bit. Shakespeare said, what is in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. It may smell as sweet, but will it carry the same status or not is the main point. So what is the importance of nomenclaturizing the allied healthcare worker in a proper way, as Dr. Venkata Suresh is proposing? This is my first point to you. And the second point is, what are the other ways in which we can build status for these people? Shubnum.
Exceedingly valid and points. I can see Ashish is smiling because we have wrestled with this from date zero when we started this journey 10 years ago for the Health Sector Skill Council. So number one, it took us a lot of heavy lifting to get the nomenclature moved from paramedical to allied. I cannot tell you what a challenge that was, because allied means that you are parallel, right? It took a humongous amount of movement to get to this one point. Evolution takes millions of years, unfortunately, right? And coming to the point where we have an allied health bill, in which tremendous amount of work has been done by Ashish's team, right? To see that skilling is recognized and is embedded itself was a challenge. So what I'm saying is, you're all absolutely right in your thoughts. It is going to time, but it will happen. And one of the short ways to some of the questions and comments on the chat box. And how do you get people to change mindsets? The only way in our country, I will not mention it for others, and it's not as if to say the other countries have not and are not continuously facing this. You just have to refer to Robert De Niro's movie, Meet the Parents, where the star is a male nurse and how the entire family reacts. This is very recent. But one of the sure shot ways is that once your skilling certificate has currency for a government job, then you have the point of arrival. And for that, recruitment rules have to change. And when that happens, the currency will start, you start feeling it in your hands, because whatever you might say, in most countries, more so ours, the concept of having a job in government based upon your certificate or your degree gives legitimacy both to that degree as well as your societal position and acceptance. So I believe with the Prime Minister launching the skills courses, it's literally been sort of, it's arrived to a point where there's no return for everybody. For all the naysayers who did not want this to move forward, it is here to stay now. And we are ever so grateful for him to finally recognize this piece. And as time goes by, if we were to slice, and I think Srinivasa made that comment to say that artificial intelligence is going in healthcare is assisted intelligence, right? So human element will never go, and the need for different people to provide care and thereby bring that sense of need, that need has to be there. So today, everybody knows what a respiratory technician is. Everybody knows, to Ashish's point, what a general duty assistant is, what an emergency medical technician is, or to Ranjit's point, it will happen, it will evolve. And also, very, very importantly, you brought a point of international portability, right? So when you have people going with these skill certificates and being employed in countries other than your own, where you're able to remit money back, again, it brings societal benchmarking. And some of the courses of HSSC are now have been adopted, correct me if I'm wrong, Ashish, in the Maldives as well as in Central Asia, right? So when people are going to take these skilling certificates and get jobs in these countries and send back money, that's how that word of mouth will start changing the color of acceptance. It'll be a long, slow journey, but the painful part is behind us.
Excellent, excellent intervention. And I was reminded, when surgeon, it takes time. You said that allied health worker, you're not liking, but actually you had to do a lot of heavy lifting to get from paramedical to allied health worker, which is also a status jump, which took a lot of sweat. And I am reminded that when the surgeons came into the market in the world, UK, beginning with, they were actually barbers. So they used to be called for a nick or a cut here or there by the doctor. But after some time, as they came into a body and they formalized their education, apprenticeship, etc., they said that we want the prefix doctor to be attached to our names. The doctor community did not agree. Okay. So this hierarchy and possessiveness is not an Indian, it's a global trait, and it's human. Doctor community.
So I'd just like to add one thing. The Department of Internal Medicine, right? actually had endocrinologists, cardiologists, gastroenterology, pulmonology, was all an internist, right? I cannot tell you the kind of cat fights they would have to say, no, you can't have a pulmonologist. It's internal medicine. You can't send a patient to a pulmonologist who has a chest infection, or you can't send. So you'll find it very interesting visiting cardiologists, diabetologists, pulmonologists under internal medicine. So these silos and the protectiveness, Srinivas will also bear me out, is inherent, and it happens in every industry. It takes a while by the time you're able to get to it. Even with specialists, Tankam is here, she would know. It takes time to let go of your territory. You know, it's a very
absolutely. And if you have some
feeling,
you know, if you have some advantage, you don't want others to have the same advantage. You know, I remember boarding trains where I did not have a reservation, and I was stopped at the gate only by somebody who was, who was the gatekeeper. Once somehow I convinced him and I entered. After that, he left and I was the new gatekeeper telling everybody who did not have a reservation, you won't be allowed. So this is human.
Yeah.
And so these surgeons, the barbers who turned into surgeons, they asked for doctor to be added. Doctors did not allow. Slowly they were growing in power, and they reached such a level of power that they say, we will not take this doctor, because now we want to tell the world that we are surgeons. So in UK, for example, surgeons don't prefix doctor. Absolutely. Because they want to be seen as bigger than a physician. And architects today are trying to add AR to their names and get it accepted by the society. So I feel there is no harm in all that the allied health workers are asking for and trying to get. And I really compliment you and Ashish, who have been at the forefront of this, this crusade. And you have at least got allied health workers for them. Great points. I will now have to come to the last question, and which I will pass on to Ashish. This is from Vinesh Menon of CEO Ampersand Group. He says, medical IoT and telemedicine and its progress in recent times, and how will the healthcare worker be involved with this? Is it being made a part of healthcare worker skilling to keep him updated? Ashish.
Thank you, Mr. Choudary. Before I answer this, I quickly want to answer, I think, the earlier question which Dr. Shubnum talks about the allied health worker. So good news for the person who asked this question is, I think government has already recognized that fact, and they are saying now allied and healthcare professionals. There's a bill now which says allied and healthcare professionals, so they are no more workers, so it's already professionals that way, at least in the regulation. So however, so we talk about in the general words may take time for us to change, but that's already done on paper now. Coming to the IoT and telemedicine, and will the healthcare workers be involved in this? So as I said, you know, all the qualifications and the curriculums and the skill training is being devised for the reason that to meet the environmental requirements as such. So environment, like if you talk about the COVID time, I think we have seen a jump into the teleconsultation and the telemedicine things, which has happened over, you know, it has jumped multiple, many folds, which I think has been kind of blessing in disguise. Otherwise, you know, as a patient relative, I think people were not so willing to actually go for a teleconsultation or using the telehealth so much. But what COVID made it, you know, that they didn't want to go to the hospital because they are sure that if they go to the hospital, they may acquire certain infections. So they also wanted to have some facility which they can use sitting at their home within the confines of their home, which is secure for them. I think that's what actually given the rise to this telemedicine bit right now, which in terms of the healthcare worker, we already had qualification which is being devised, which is for healthcare worker. It is basically a person who is an intermediary between a patient and a physician here or a specialist here. We call them telemedicine coordinators. And there are various equipments which are there in the country today, which actually do the, we'll talk about teleophthalmology, teleradiology, so telepathology. So everything is tele today. So many things are being added to tele today. And we already have a role which healthcare worker will do when supporting all these tele requirements which are there. Uh, we are in discussion with the CSC also how this can be adopted by them as well. There are multiple areas where how this is being utilized now. In fact, if you move away from telemedicine a bit in terms of IoT, as I think he already mentioned, a lot of AI is being utilized for actually arriving at a decision. But this is only an assistive requirement. It has to be further ratified by a physician or a specialist for sure. So yes, we already have healthcare workers which can be trained in telemedicine, playing that role of intermediary and connecting the person. And good example of this could be, although it's not so much of telemedicine, we talk about Ayushman Bharat PMJ. So we have a person called PM Arogya Mitra, whose role is an intermediary between a patient and the hospital services which is provided, which is somehow connected to this. So he also becomes intermediary, which can then be extended to now telemedicine. Thank you.
Excellent points. In fact, just to add one point which BlueCircle research found regarding the appeal of telemedicine, it also grew so fast because it protected the dignity of the worker, dignity of the patient. Because any interface with an arrogant healthcare worker was actually avoided because of the digital protection which that space provides in telemedicine. And this importantly came in our research. And the other thing which came in our research from an adjacent area, that e-shopping also increased during COVID. And one of the reasons for e-shopping to increase other than the usual was that it also allowed the lower income person, it increased mostly in the lower income bracket. Those lower income people could shop more in greater dignity, because when they were going otherwise to shopping centers and malls and hypermarkets, either the shopkeeper or the fellow shopper may have kind of behaved condescendingly with them because of their attire or because of their accent, etc. So this was another big thing regarding telemedicine which came. And the point which you have brought is beautiful. We need telemedical chaperones because many people are not so digitally fluent. Many of the interfaces, digital interfaces are clunky. And JCI says that all the signages, etc., which you use in your websites or apps to help board the patient on telemedicine should be understandable to fifth class person, fifth class pass student. And that is not the case. Right now, our apps leave a lot to be desired. And so a virtual chaperone would be a great idea. In terms of IoT, also digital fluency will surely benefit. Tomorrow, the day is not far where the old lady who is sitting in her home, she has missed one vital medicine. The spoon has detected that there is greater tremor, and her gait has been detected through IoT, and the signal has to be now caught by the healthcare worker to be there to assist her or to warn one of their one of her family members. So, and I'm glad that you are bringing such level of digital fluency among your people to be able to hop onto these wagons as they start moving. So super points, great interactions, very good questions, and very fine answers. And lastly, I'd like to say, in our defense and aerospace sector, I concluded the last discussion by saying, adding to what our Prime Minister says, Veer Bhoge Vasundhara. I said, I would like to add humbly to this, Chatur Bhoge Vasundhara. And here I would like to add, after what I have heard from you, to Veer Bhoge Vasundhara, to Chatur Bhoge Vasundhara, Saksham Bhoge Vasundhara. And you are really skilling those people to become Saksham. Thank you very much. Great session. I will, on that note, pass on to Siddharth.
Thank you very much, ma'am and sirs. Such an insightful and engaging conversation, and an absolute privilege to hear you all. And very well moderated, Mr. Choudary. Our leaders and I have been hooked till the end, and we've taken home several nuggets from today's conversation. I'm still receiving messages from our members as we speak, and I really wish we had more time. And thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining in and for staying till the end and for always sharing excellent questions. For the questions that may not have been addressed due to paucity of time, I will share the relevant ones with the leaders on the panel and request some of their time for it. We will also try to post the answers in the community app as well. Along with our weekly webinars and our publication, we're taking these discussions and conversations on the exclusive app, which is curated for senior leaders currently across 6 sectors, which are healthcare, e-mobility, energy, logistics, real estate, and aerospace and defense. We're also adding many new features and 14 new sectors that also have synergistic diversifications with each other to support the ecosystem to grow further. So whether you would like to engage with us on the platform, leaders are invited to join. So thank you very much once again. We look forward to having more such discussions, and please stay safe.
Bye.
Thanks, Siddharth. Thanks.